6 months later, the lobby of Northstar looked different. The floors gleamed not from obligation, but from care. The reception desk, once cold and clinical, now held fresh flowers and warm greetings. The energy in the building had shifted. Something that had been hollow was now alive again. Under Elena's leadership, Northstar stabilized, then began to grow. Clients returned, not because of desperate pitches, but because they trusted the people behind them. The restructuring worked. Internal promotions increased. Employees, once quiet and disengaged, started speaking up, offering ideas, volunteering for initiatives. It wasn't just financial recovery. It was cultural repair. One crisp morning, Elena stood outside the building with her son Matteo, now 12. He was taller, curious as ever, and eyed the skyscraper with cautious awe. "So this is where it happened?" he asked. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "This is where it started." He looked at her with wide eyes. "What did it feel like when he said that to you?" Elena paused. She could still remember the sting of that moment, the heat in her face, the heavy silence of shame. But it no longer weighed her down. "It felt like the world got very small," she said. "But then I realized I could make it bigger. On my terms." Matteo nodded, thoughtful. "You didn't give up." "No," she said quietly, "because I wasn't proving anything to him. I was proving something to myself." They walked into the building together, past the glass doors etched with the Northstar logo. Employees greeted her by name, some with admiration, others simply with comfort. She was no longer a symbol of comeback. She was a standard. Later that afternoon, Elena found herself alone in the boardroom, the same room where she'd once been humiliated and later crowned. She looked out the window at the skyline she used to watch from a city bus. Her reflection looked back, composed, unflinching. Success, she had learned, was never about applause. It wasn't about showing the world you were better than the people who doubted you. It was about choosing who you became in the aftermath. Staying kind, staying focused, staying whole. She didn't want a statue or a speech. She wanted a legacy, and she had started building one. The boardroom had not changed. Same long mahogany table, same panoramic window overlooking the city skyline, same leather chairs, designed more for intimidation than comfort. But this time, Elena didn't stand outside the door with a cleaning rag in her hand. She sat at the head of the table. The directors, some nervous, some hopeful, watched her closely. The buyout had saved them from collapse, but now they waited to see what kind of leader they had inherited. Elena opened her notebook and spoke without preamble. "Let's be clear. This isn't a hostile takeover. This is a reset. Northstar has value, but it's been buried under complacency and ego. We fix that, not with cosmetic changes, but real structural reform." The room was still. Even those who had doubted the new CEO found themselves leaning in. She had their attention, not through fear, but clarity. Someone cleared their throat. Richard Davenport. He sat 3 seats down, older, thinner than she remembered, the arrogance weathered but not gone. His contract had included a temporary advisory role, a final act of face-saving before his inevitable exit. Elena had allowed it. Symbolically, it mattered. "Ms. Reyes," he said, his voice stiff formal, "I trust you're aware of the cultural foundation this company was built on." She didn't flinch. "I know exactly what it was built on, Mr. Davenport, and I know what it can become." His lips twitched at the edge, not quite a smile. "And what qualifies you think you can lead a firm of this size and history?" Elena leaned forward, calm, unshaken. "Because I built strategies that outperformed yours for 5 years straight. Because I understand what it means to lead with purpose. And because I've worked every job beneath this roof. Jobs you've never seen, much less respected." The boardroom went silent. Davenport blinked, perhaps realizing, finally, that the woman across from him was not there to argue. She was there to lead. "You once called me useless," she continued, voice steady. "That moment stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it clarified who I never wanted to become." Davenport glanced away. A flush crept up his neck. "I'm not here for revenge," Elena added. I'm here because this company still matters to its clients, to its staff, to the future of this industry. If you're willing to contribute meaningfully in the time you have left, I welcome that. But if you plan to obstruct progress, I'll recommend the board accelerate your exit. It wasn't a threat. It was a choice. Davenport stood slowly, gathering his papers. I think I've said enough. She didn't stop him. As the door clicked shut behind him, a quiet breath passed through the room. Elena glanced at the directors. Now, let's talk solutions. What followed was not easy. Layoffs had to be handled. Divisions restructured. Trust rebuilt from the ground up. Elena worked longer hours than she had as a cleaner. But this time, she built with her mind, not her hands. And she never forgot anyone. From interns to senior staff, she walked the halls, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. In the break room one evening, a young janitor approached her, nervously wiping his palms on his uniform. Ms. Reyes, I just wanted to say, I heard how you started. It means something to see someone like you up there. Elena smiled, not with pride, but with gratitude. Thank you, she said. Just remember, where you start is never the end of your story. The Northstar file sat alone on Elena's desk, thick with numbers and red ink. Earnings were down. Debt was rising. Morale was lower than the company's stock price. Davenport had slashed middle management in a desperate attempt to cut costs. But all it did was accelerate the rot. Elena studied the projections with the cold clarity of a surgeon. This wasn't personal. This was an asset in decline, bloated with legacy operations, and led by a man who had mistaken arrogance for vision. She stood at the window of her office, gazing at the city's steel skyline. Somewhere below, Northstar's headquarters still stood, its name etched in glass and pride. Once, she had looked up at that building and believed it was a world she'd never enter. Now, she could dismantle it with a phone call. Seal and Partners convened the acquisition committee that afternoon. Elena presented the case. Cleanly, unemotionally. Northstar has valuable infrastructure and a still salvageable client base, she explained. The brand is tarnished, but not irreparable. Poor leadership has dragged it down, but under new direction, the fundamentals are recoverable. We acquire, restructure, reposition. One of the senior partners tapped a pen on the table. What about internal resistance? There won't be any, Elena replied. The current board is fractured. Investor pressure is mounting. If we move fast and offer a lifeline, they'll fold. She didn't mention Davenport by name. She didn't need to. After the meeting, she stayed behind to run one more model. She adjusted variables, retention scenarios, client rebound rejections, leadership restructuring. In every version, the results were the same. Northstar could thrive again, but only with bold change at the top. A few days later, the offer was extended, a structured buyout with transition conditions. There was resistance, as expected, but no real fight. Davenport's credibility had eroded even among his allies. His golden parachute shrank with every call he refused to return. And then came the final call. Elena, said the managing partner, it's done. Northstar is ours. We want you to run it. She didn't answer right away. We can send someone else in to stabilize it, he offered. But let's be honest, there's no one better suited. No one who understands both sides of the story like you do. Elena sat still for a long time. Finally, she said, I'll do it on one condition. What's that? I don't want this to be a revenge play. We don't buy companies to punish people. We do it to build something better. There was a pause. Understood, he said. 2 weeks later, Elena walked through the revolving doors of Northstar Financial. This time, she wore a tailored navy suit. No mop, no bucket, just a calm, steady stride and a folder under her arm marked Transition Plan, Phase 1. The lobby looked the same. Cold stone floors, glass elevators. She caught her reflection as she passed and didn't look away. An assistant greeted her nervously. Ms. Reyes, the board is waiting upstairs. She smiled just slightly. Let's not keep them waiting. As she rode the elevator, something unexpected settled over her. Not triumph, but clarity. This wasn't a return. This was a reclamation. She wasn't here to prove anyone wrong. She was here to prove herself right. The office of Seal & Partners was nothing like Northstar. It occupied a single floor in a modest downtown building, where the carpet was worn thin in places, and the coffee came from a shared Keurig. But what it lacked in flash, it made up for in brilliance. Every desk housed a mind sharp enough to cut steel, and Elena was determined to prove she belonged. Her first days as an intern were quiet. She watched, listened, absorbed. She double-checked spreadsheets until the numbers blurred, caught errors before the associates noticed, and asked smart questions. Never too many, always at the right time. One of the analysts, a guarded woman named Priya, started leaving sticky notes on Elena's desk. Great catch on the model. You should lead the next case study presentation. Little nudges, small signals. Elena tucked them away like treasures. Then came the moment that changed everything. An emergency meeting was called after a major client's portfolio dropped unexpectedly. The senior team gathered in the war room, glass walls, dim lighting, tension thick as smoke. Elena sat at the edge of the room, taking notes, unseen. They debated strategies, liquidity cushions, rebalancing, damage control. Elena flipped through the report, heart racing. A number stood out, subtle but wrong. A miscalculation in risk correlation between two foreign energy assets. She hesitated. This wasn't her place. But she raised her hand anyway. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I think there's an overlooked correlation risk with the Aileron and Toluco holdings. It may be contributing to the volatility." Silence. The managing partner frowned. "What correlation?" She explained. Clearly, concisely. And when she finished, the entire room leaned in to look at her numbers. The partner turned to his lead analyst. "Run this scenario. Now." 20 minutes later, Elena was proven right. Her model not only predicted the dip, they used it to adjust the client's portfolio and prevent further loss. A mistake averted. A reputation salvaged. After the meeting, the same partner stopped her in the hall. "You're not an intern anymore," he said. "Welcome aboard." From that day, her title changed. First analyst, then senior, then associate. Her work became bolder. She learned how to see beyond the data, how leadership moved markets, how ego built empires and ignorance brought them down. She studied deals the way some people studied art. Every clause a shadow. She learned to spot patterns buried beneath distractions. And she never forgot where she came from. At home, Matteo had grown too. He was now 11 and endlessly curious, always asking questions about stocks and charts, proudly telling his teachers his mom did big money things. Elena smiled when he said it, but she never let it change her core. She still packed his lunches every night, still kept a framed photo of her mother on the kitchen shelf, a reminder of sacrifice and survival. Then one Monday morning, just before her 5th anniversary at the firm, an internal email thread caught her attention. A potential acquisition target had surfaced. Struggling mid-sized financial company. Sharp decline over the last 3 quarters, morale low, leadership unstable. The name glared at her from the screen. Northstar Financial. For a moment, Elena just stared. The last time she stood in their building, she held a mop. Now she held the pen that could sign their future away. She closed her laptop slowly, heart steady, mind sharp. Not yet, but soon. The classroom smelled like chalk, dust, and burnt coffee. It was smaller than Elena had imagined, tucked behind a row of vending machines in the community college's oldest building. The walls were scuffed and the fluorescent lights flickered, but to Elena, it felt like a cathedral. She sat in the back row, notebook stacked neatly, pen poised. Around her were others, some young, some older, all quietly determined. A construction worker with calloused hands. A woman in scrubs, yawning into her textbook. They were people like her, rebuilding something. No one here had time for excuses. Her first class was Principles of Finance. The professor, a wiry man with restless energy, wrote equations on the whiteboard with such enthusiasm it looked like performance art. Elena took furious notes, her handwriting slanting slightly as she tried to keep up. At first, the numbers intimidated her. Balance sheets, asset allocation, risk-return ratios. It all seemed like a foreign language. But something clicked. The logic soothed her. There was beauty in the symmetry of a well-organized ledger, in the way risk could be measured and minimized, in how a company's story could be told through its numbers. At night, when Mateo was asleep, she stayed up reading textbooks borrowed from the campus library. Their spines cracked, margins filled with the ghosts of past students. Her apartment, once quiet and still, came alive with charts, notes, and whisper equations. She stopped watching TV, stopped scrolling through her phone. Her time had become currency, and she invested every minute. But it wasn't easy. Some days, the exhaustion was unbearable. She'd mop floors from 6 p.m. to midnight, rush home, tuck Mateo into bed, then study until her vision blurred. There were times she questioned herself, times when a poor test grade felt like a verdict, when she feared the system was rigged to keep women like her from climbing out. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling double shift, she sat on the bus home, her hands blistered and mind clouded. Across from her, a teenage girl was watching a finance video on her phone. Something about the stock market. The girl was frowning, confused. Elena leaned forward without thinking. "You see that red line?" she said gently. "It's showing a drop in share price after week earnings report. See here? This part means the market expected growth, but the company didn't deliver." The girl blinked, surprised. "Oh, that actually makes sense. Thanks." Elena smiled and leaned back. It was the first time she realized how much she understood, how far she'd come from just mopping floors outside boardrooms. Word by word, number by number, she was rewriting her life. By the end of the year, she ranked in the top 10% of her class. One of her professors pulled her aside after a seminar and asked if she'd ever considered investment strategy as a specialty. He offered her a summer internship at a small boutique firm, unpaid, but filled with opportunity. Elena hesitated. Mateo needed her. Bills didn't pay themselves. But she said yes, because some doors don't open twice. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Elena Reyes scrubbed the marble floor outside the executive boardroom of Northstar Financial. It was just past 7 a.m., the time when silence still lingered in the corridors and the scent of freshly brewed coffee hadn't yet replaced the sting of bleach. Her knees ached from kneeling, but she moved with practiced precision, her body tracing the same patterns it had for the last 3 years. She had learned long ago how to be invisible. Inside the boardroom, muffled voices rose and fell. Early birds in tailored suits, plotting financial strategies over pastries. Elena kept her head down. She didn't envy them, not exactly, but she observed them with quiet fascination. Their confidence was effortless, like they were born knowing they belonged. She often wondered what it would feel like to walk into a room and own it. The boardroom door swung open with a sharp click, startling her. She quickly shifted back, rag in hand, but not fast enough. Richard Davenport, CEO of Northstar and master cold stares, stepped into the hallway. He was tall and silver-haired, his pinstripe suit tailored to perfection. Behind him trailed 2 junior executives, chuckling at something he'd just said. He stopped abruptly, his polished shoe nearly skidding on the wet tile. "What the hell is this?" Davenport barked, pointing at the damp floor. Elena rose halfway, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm just finishing, sir. I'll be out of your way in a moment." Davenport narrowed his eyes at her, his voice loud enough to carry down the hall. "Do you think this is a hotel? We have clients coming in 20 minutes, and you're out here playing housemaid." The junior executives froze. One glanced at Elena with something like pity. The other stared at his shoes. Elena, cheeks burning, opened her mouth to apologize, but no words came. "She's useless," Davenport declared, shaking his head. "This is exactly why standards are slipping around here. Even the cleaning staff can't get things right." His words sliced through the air like a blade. He didn't wait for a reply. Turning on his heel, he vanished back into the boardroom, the laughter of his associates trailing behind him. Elena stood still for a long moment, the rag limp in her hand. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, not from fear, but something else, something unfamiliar. Not anger, though that simmered too, but resolve, a fierce, unexpected surge of it. She had endured many indignities in her life. working long hours to support her 8-year-old son, Mateo, eating dinner after everyone else, so he never saw her go without, riding the early bus while the city still slept. She had survived by staying quiet, by staying small. But this moment, the sting of being called useless in front of strangers, landed differently. It didn't crush her. It crystallized something inside her. Later that day, after her shift ended, Elena sat alone at her kitchen table, a worn manila envelope in front of her. Inside was a pamphlet she'd picked up weeks ago but hadn't dared to read too closely. Night Classes in Business Administration. Build the future you deserve. She opened it with steady fingers. No one would call her useless again.